Hello everyone, this is ponderonweather. In this update, we're going to be talking about a giant storm coming with a major snowstorm and a possible blizzard with a flood risk over the next 7 to 10 days. So if you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button and the notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's get right to it. This is Tuesday, October the 5th. And this is the vorticity index on the North American view. And this kind of really gives you a true depiction on what's really happening currently right now. We've got this low pressure here parked over the southeast. That's bringing some very heavy rain. They even have some flood watches for that area. We also have another low level vorticity out here in Southern California that's definitely bringing some welcome rain for them. But yet we have another spoke of energy out here in the Pacific Northwest that's bringing some rain for them. And then we also have another one that's going to be brewing, and these are going to be sending spokes of energy down over the next couple days, and especially in the next week, as these will just intensify one right after another, coming up with our big storm for next week. So let's take a look at the overall hazard map. For currently, we've got those flash flood watches in place for the southeast into Alabama here, as well as Georgia, with some very heavy rain. We also have got a red flag warning up here into Montana with some higher winds that's going to be in that area for this for today. And we've got some dense fog advisories this morning up here in Minnesota, as well as Indiana and Ohio. As we take a look over the radar over the next 2 days and where the rain's going to fall, it's going to be underneath that low level of vorticity out here in the southeast. So your places like Alabama, Mississippi, Alabama, into Georgia here, parts of South Carolina, especially Tennessee, and getting into North Carolina here, as well as Virginia and Kentucky, Arkansas, Missouri, into Illinois, Indiana, as well as Ohio, getting some rain under that low level vorticity, but also into the desert Southwest, and Southern California is going to be getting the action into Southern California, Nevada, Utah, especially into Arizona, as well as Idaho, yet along the coast here into the Pacific Northwest, where they've got all those higher rains that have been back in the picture for the last week or two. And I just think that's going to continue for them. So as we transition into that Thursday morning time frame, that low level center is still out here parked over the southeast, dumping some heavier rains all throughout the day, even on Thursday. So yes, you still have those heavier rains to contend with today, tomorrow, and that will just continue into the afternoon hours on Thursday. And then we have that cold front out here in California. How often have you seen a cold front in California map over the last several months? It just hasn't happened. So that is definitely a welcome change for that area, bringing some cooler conditions, and then even some snow is going to be cold enough to dump some snow in the higher elevations of Idaho into Montana, getting into Nevada and Utah here, and the Sahara Mountains as well. And then back behind it, we've got those rain showers to contend with. But as we transition into that Friday time frame, there's vorticities. We've got that one off the California coast here, but we got another one that's going to be brewing up here in the Pacific Northwest. You can actually see this one kind of fizzling out and fading out by then, but it's going to leave a lot of rain in its wake. So as we transition to the 500 millibar, you can really get a depiction on where that cold air is going to be. We've got spokes and spokes of energy coming down from the Pacific Northwest. That's going to create kind of a funnel effect, draining that cold air down into the surface. And underneath that cold air, we've got rain and snow to contend with out here as the ridge builds well to the north up here in southeast Canada. And underneath, you got some very warm conditions, but you got all those rain showers and storms to contend with into the southeast. So as we transition to over during the day on Friday, there's that low level center kind of ringing itself out. Now it's going to be parked over Florida, into along the coastline here into the Carolinas, as well as Virginia and West Virginia. Getting into places like Pittsburgh, going to be seeing some rain. This is on Friday, October the 8th. And that goes through the Ohio Valley as well as we have that other low level center here out here in California. It's going to be wringing out the moisture out here into places like Wyoming, into Montana, as well as the Dakotas. And yet, yes, we have yet that other system that's going to be brewing and dragging down into the weekend into the Pacific Northwest, because by the time we get into that Sunday time frame, you can see this one's wringing itself out. This one's almost kind of wringing itself out. As yet we have another storm that's going to be brewing. And this is going to be the big player, especially going into the next week, for that monster storm that's going to be brewing and dumping some very heavy snow, and if not a blizzard at times in parts of the country. So definitely we'll go over the details on that. But Sunday, you're kind of like in between systems, because if you look at the overall surface map, there's not much happening on a Sunday. Everything's well to the north into British Columbia and to Alaska here, with that very intense low-level center that's going to be developing off the Bering Strait seas here, off the Gulf of Alaska, bringing down that very cold air and a lot of snow with it as we transition into that Tuesday time frame, October the 12th. You can see where all the cold air is going to be. The ridge of high pressure is locked and loaded over the southeast Canada, bringing those well above average temperature anomalies for much of the central and eastern part of the U.S. All the cold air and the Arctic blast is going to be out here on the West Coast, bringing the coldest air of the season. And underneath this, out here in Idaho and Utah and Montana, getting into Colorado, you're talking 20, if not 30 degrees below average. And that is where all the snow is going to be flying with that massive storm that's brewing. Definitely look at the U shape that's going to be taking shape by the time we get into that Tuesday time frame. It's bringing down that very cold air with it, and this is going to be the biggest storm we've seen in a long time, with the first major snowstorm on the table for next week, as this cold air continues to drain and this really starts to deepen and amplify and really start to take shape by the time we get in that Tuesday time frame. Because underneath it, we've got that low level center. It's 997 millibar, but it's going to be cold enough and definitely a lot of moisture with it to be snowing out here into Nevada, getting into even portions of Oregon here and Idaho, as well as Montana, getting into Wyoming. That'll be on the day on Tuesday. But yes, as we deepen it into Wednesday, man, look at this. I mean, this is just a giant storm that's going to be brewing, and it's got some very intense winds, and this just deepens as we go through the day on a Wednesday. So you can definitely see that hook that's taken shape over the West Coast here, getting into the interior states. And underneath that, we've got a lot of snow that's going to be flying into Idaho, into Montana, into Wyoming here, getting into western parts of Colorado. Look at the low pressure now, 990. It was a 997. So we're talking a 990 low pressure center over the U.S., dumping some very heavy rain. And at times we could be looking at blizzard like conditions, because check what happens by the time we get into the Wednesday evening time frame. It drops down to a 981. So we transition from a 997 to a 990. Now we're talking a 981 low level pressure. You know that has a lot of capability. And look at the isobars really starting to tighten up here. That is an indication where we got some very intense winds. They're going to be cranking, and blizzard-like conditions out here in this area, with these dark blues really showing up on the map. So this is definitely going to be your biggest snowstorm we've seen this season by far, because we really haven't had that much cold air to contend with. But now we really are going to be out here off the West Coast. So let's take a look at the overall winds that you could see over the next 10 days. Much of this is really going to be intense. But yeah, if you're a truck driver, you need to pay attention, because this is some pretty intense winds you're going to be dealing with as we get into next week, into portions of Arizona, into Utah, getting into New Mexico and Colorado, as we transition into Wyoming here in Montana. I mean, look at the graph here down at the bottom. We're talking 60, 70, upwards to possibly 80 mile per hour winds you're going to be contending with along this region. So this is a widespread event. It's a massive storm that's going to be brewing next week, and those winds are just going to be extending all the way into the Dakotas, into Nebraska, even into portions of Kansas as we get through into the early part of next week, and especially the middle part of next week with this giant storm that's brewing. Let's take a look at the rain and where all the heavier rains are going to fall. Yeah, especially off the west coast and the northeast. I mean, the northwest here, and to Washington and Oregon. Some lighter amounts into Northern California, but even some rains into Central California, even Southern California is definitely a welcome sight. I mean, they've been high and dry, so we'll take anything that we can get in that neck of the woods. And to Nevada here with some heavier rains, it really starts to intensify as you get into northern Utah and southern Idaho. A lot of this is actually going to be forming, going in the form of snow, and especially into Montana and getting into Wyoming. There's that other vorticity index into the southeast is dumping the heavier rains now. But yeah, over the next 7 to 10 days, you could easily pick up 4, 6, even 8-inch amounts, is no question, into Florida. So much of the southeast and the east coast here is going to be under the gun with the heavier rains, and even the northeast. That's not going to stop. You've been really wet, and you're going to continue to remain wet. It somewhat calms down as you get back into portions of Maine here, as these systems kind of stop before it gets there. And then along that boundary, along where these low vorticities come together and kind of fade out, that's where they're going to be picking up some heavier rains in the northern interior states. You're going to be warm, but underneath that, you got some heavier rains. They're going to be falling in much of the Dakotas, into northern ports of Minnesota, as well as Wisconsin here, even into Michigan. So as we transition into the snow, man, look at this. I mean, this is pretty intense snow. I mean, easily double digits, is no question whatsoever underneath, especially in the higher elevations of the Sierras, the Nevada, and to Idaho, and to Utah here, into western parts of Colorado. I don't think Denver actually gets into the action from this particular system, but all the really intense heavy snow is going to be underneath into portions of Wyoming, especially into Montana, where you could be upwards to possibly 2 feet in isolated amounts, is not out of the question coming up, especially for that Tuesday, Wednesday time frame. You're going to get sporadic snow showers before then, but the big event is going to be coming up for next week into that Tuesday, Wednesday, and going into the transition to Thursday time frame with some very heavy snow, and definitely the biggest snow of the season by far. So man, I know there was a lot to talk about this morning, so I appreciate you watching. Definitely like this video, give it a thumbs up so YouTube knows that you value my content and they'll share it with others. Appreciate you watching. Definitely subscribe to my channel and catch me in the latest update where I protect you for and after the storm.